Hello, my name's Evan. This video is specifically for Trey Anastasio, but also anybody that's interested in what I have figured out, I think. Trey, if this happens to get to you and you have time to watch it, first off, thank you for taking the time. I will try to be brief, but I think I have figured out something which you may be interested in. I have had a Langeudoc since 2014. Mine is made out of Claro walnut, and I have had a Twinkleland amp for about 8 years, which is a relatively well-respected Dumble style amp clone, kind of in the style of Robin Ford, made by Peter Van Wielden in Europe. The purpose of this video is his effects loop, in my opinion, jailbreaks the touch sensitivity response between the Langeudoc guitar and the amplifier in a way that I feel like I hear your Dumble behaving in a way very similar to the way this behaves without that effects loop. I see you have the 2-rock effects loop, and from my understanding, the 2-rock effects loop is not designed to interact or compress the signal from the guitar coming in. However, Peter Van Wielden's Twinklelator is designed to interact with the touch sensitivity and also add a compression to the whole circuit. What I notice my amp does, and I feel like I have been hearing the Dumble do it with your setup as well, is it is so fast in response that it, both on the input of the signal and as the signal starts to decay, that I feel it actually misses some important information that the Langeudoc has to offer. I don't experience such a drastic shift gear-wise with any Strat I have. A Les Paul style guitar gets closer kind of with a chambered guitar, but the way that the Langeudoc functions with regards to its symmetrical note, which I'll explain in a minute, and also how the feedback begins to impact both the way the guitar behaves, feels, and starts to resonate into that feedback which you have made so amazingly tasteful. So trying to be as organized as possible, I will go down my list. Symmetrical note, what is it? It's what I would describe it as attacking the string, and at the apex of where the attacks would start to turn into sustain, releasing the note at the same rough speed that you're attacking with. I'll plug in and you'll hear, but without being plugged in, that shape of the note I notice when I'm going straight into the amp. It's there, but its max length, it feels way shorter. And the effect that I notice that has is it makes it much harder to get the notes rolling. It depends on the beats per minute, like a song like Possum, where you kind of get that kind of that rolling quarter note thing. It makes it so, it looks at the back of the note and the front of the note so quick that ends up being an unavoidable space, given the beats per minute of the song, between when the back of the note ends and the next note's attacked. And for me, I constantly cannot fall into any sort of a groove with that. It makes it really difficult just in the way that the amp is looking at the guitar. It feels to me like there is more information that the Langeudoc, whether it's how the bracing, had this brace like a violin, it has almost a very subtle transient as you come off as you release the note. There's this thing that only this does. And I have only heard you do it. So there's that. That also affects things like sort of the rakes. the space between the notes. It makes it smoother to rake. Something like that sort of vibe makes it so much more. It feels like the amp starts to understand the way that this guitar puts out information in a way where it does not feel mushy. It does not feel like it allows us as guitar players to be any less honest. It is still keeping us very honest, but it is way more understanding. The other thing that it does is I find it takes the pedals a lot easier. I do find the amp in general is a little bit funky with a compressor, but when his Twinklelator is in the effects loop, I find that the compressor starts to act more like a overdrive pedal for the clean tone, where you get access to a lot more of the infinite sustain, and it starts to feel like it's much easier to catch it. The sweet spot feels a lot bigger. So now I'm going to plug in and take you through a little bit of some examples. I have the Twinklelator plugged in now. At the end, I'll do some videos with it unplugged, so you can hear the difference. But my assumption is if you've made it this far, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna pause it. Here we go. So Twinklelator's plugged in. I have earplugs in. It's loud. Getting room mic here. Also has some sound coming in from the phone, which I'll try and mix in if it's needed. But starting out directly through the pedal board, I have a free the tone sort of looper thing. So it's with no pedals, it's going directly in. So as you'll see, first thing, that's where to start. So just the shape of the symmetric note, trying to hit it attack symmetrically. So as hard as I'm hitting the attack, I'm trying to also come off the string. You'll hear it's very even. So it allows you to get the rolling thing. I'll show you at the end what it sounds like without the Twinklelator, but to me that sounds very even, but it also sounds like the actual, what is available as far as the shape of the note is just long enough that it allows for tunes that are different beats per minute to get that rolling thing where the quarter notes are kind of going one to the other to the other. Next thing, I notice in my Dumble when in the Twinkleland, when I slide into notes or down to notes, there is kind of a drop off in where it's sustaining, but with the Twinklelator, it's smooth. The decay is smoother, right? It's not forever yet, but smoother. Much more linear on the way down versus kind of it sort of drops off, and when I'm plugged directly in, it's a good word, plugged directly into the amp. So there's that. Then there's sort of the palm muting, makes it a lot more expressive and easier to use that in expression. I notice when I'm plugged directly in, the fact that it's so fast makes it hard to fall into a groove with that, almost similar to the symmetrical note thing. So that is another aspect to it. Then plugging in with the compressor, I have a Koji Suhr compressor set to slow attack to kind of catch the end of the note. I'm going to turn away so that I can hopefully do this as best as possible, but you get a lot of access to infinite sustain. Even on a low E on the D string. I also noticed that the compressor seems to act kind of weird, or it's hard to get a really comfortable good setting when it's straight into the amp, with that super fast attack, and almost the transients get just very, for me, I find it at times a bit harsh. But when the Twinklelator is plugged in, after it's smoothed out, it seems to be much more understanding of the compressor and much more understanding of how the guitar is trying to communicate with the amp, which will change how it behaves in your hands. That's what this video is about, how it behaves in your hands, right? So my hunch is it will lead to playing different things, and possibly feel even more fun to play. So there's that. What else? So using the overdrive channel on the amp, also really comfortable. Mid boost on, and the second channel, it's not, do you have to try and catch the feedback wave, and some of them do definitely overtake, but it feels like the Goldilocks zone of where you can catch it, and the notes that are available for that feels like the window of tolerance is much wider. And then as far as the TS9 pedals, I think they sound great when that thing's plugged in. So here's the first one is set similar to the lower gain option. Even the palm muting here with the pedal. It's the lower one, the higher one. With no compressor, so as you can hear, it does feel kind of reminds me of catching a wave on a boogie board. Sometimes it's just smooth and picks you up, and you can feel it, and it becomes a really cool experience to play the guitar. Lastly, do notice one thing that the Langeudoc does that I have never experienced in another guitar, and that is there's something about the touch sensitivity of it and the way that the body interacts with the hands that you'll hit this note and it almost has a slight bit of like a super subtle wah filter where the guitar starts to talk. It's hard to do that on command, but when this Twinklelator is plugged in with TS9 or with the compressor, especially if there's a delay, I notice happening, it really begins to just do that in a way that's a little bit more accessible, easier to find, and it just sounds really good. Lastly, I'm guessing you might wonder how the Twinklelator sounds effects-wise, and I personally think it sounds great. The other thing is it has two different channels with a foot switch where you have two different output volumes, and you have bright switches both on the input level, and the two output levels each have a bright switch if you want them, depending on how they work with the effects, or if you want to have a setting kind of without the effects. But I have a Bell Epoch tape delay plugged in. I'll give you a quick listen to that so you can hear the effects loop. So, light on, light off. It's also unplugged. Let's go through this. First thing, slides. What I notice is when I slide, the decay is not linear. Kind of comes down a bit and then levels off real quick, and then it seems linear. So yeah, here it kind of come down quick and then start to level off. It goes away pretty quick. Speed of a symmetric note, trying that equal attack is to release, right? To me, faster. Notice as I go slower, you'll start to hear the note ring in a weird sort of way, so you can't really do that, right? So I can do it, it does it, but when there's a song that's certain beats per minute, and that needs to be just a hair longer, it kind of feels like there's a weird silence in between it, and it's really hard for me to lock in. I don't know if you experience that. Palm muting, harder to get expressive with it. I find it feels so quick that it's hard to lock into the groove. Put the compressor on, you notice just doesn't quite work the same as when you have the Twinklelator plugged in and it's doing what it does. So. The infinite sustain is harder to find. Not impossible to find, but harder. It feels like there's less places where that Goldilocks zone is accessible. There's that quick drop off. There's the quick drop off again, which I notice I don't have when the effects loop is plugged in. There I'm getting sustain, but I am not getting the guitar to do the reverberation that it does, where it gets into feeding the note into a loop, right, and just starts being manageable. There I feel it sustain, but I'm not feeling it here. That note, I do feel it here. So there's some that still does it, for sure. It does feel much easier to find when you have that plugged in, right? boring, kind of funky chicken picking thing. All there, but it just sounds so quick that it's, depending on certain tunes, it just feels hard to lock in to a groove because it's so quick. It feels like there's silence sort of plugged in between the notes, which I find leads me to feel like I'm screwing up. So yeah. So then moving to the lower TS9, which if you remember, when the Twinklelator is plugged in, it's very easy to get to a lot of points where you can get the sustain going. But without it, not so much. So like that last note sustains, but not in a way where the whole guitar starts to become part of the equation. It just almost feels like it's under your fingers and that's it. I do notice though, the more gain I seem to get on, the more the notes rounds off and the more it feels understanding. I know that there was, in your Corey Wong interview there, you had said something where the Mesa can kind of feel mushy and the Dumbo, for lack of a better words, I can't remember if this is what you said, but maybe feels more, keeps us more honest. I do feel like this whole system, especially with that effects loop, the honesty is there. It's just there's an understanding that allows more, a much more unique behavior between the guitar, the amp, and even the pedals. So with the heavier TS9, it gets closer to that, even without the Twinklelator on. Jedi Master, it is still harder to find it. Feels like you have to thread the needle a bit more. So, in conclusion, I think I have gone through everything on my list. Checking one more time. Yeah. So if you've made it this far, I hope this is useful for you. Hope it leads to finding even more joy out of your setup. And Fish's music has always meant a lot to me and will continue to mean a lot to me. And thank you for everything you guys have done. I look forward to experiencing you guys more in the future. Take care.